Alexander Volkov, a young, successful but lonely CEO of New York, and Clara Hayes, an independent, attractive woman from completely different backgrounds. They rush into each other passionately, believing that they have found the perfect match for each other. It all seems like a fairy tale. But what happens when the fairy tale turns into a nightmare? When a cruel truth from the past is exposed, a buried family secret reveals that the fated bond between them is deeper and are more taboo than anything they could have imagined. Their passionate love suddenly turns into something wrong, a horrifying truth that brings the whole world crashing down. Same blood, different fate is not an ordinary love story. It is a tragedy about fate, about the consequences of hidden secrets, and a painful confrontation with an unchangeable truth. How will Alexander and Clara face this shock? Is there any way out for them from the mixed emotions of love, disgust, and heartache? If you are brave enough to explore a love story full of twists and turns and haunting, don't miss this one. Alexander Volkov, at the age of 28, is already a formidable name in the New York financial world. He is the CEO of Apex Innovations, a technology investment company on the rise, a position he achieved not only through inheritance, but also through a sharp mind and an almost obsessive focus on his work. He runs the company with an iron fist, decisive, logical, sometimes making his older colleagues respect him, but also somewhat distant. Raised in luxury, his childhood lacked the warmth of a complete family. His father died early, and his mother, an elegant but somewhat cold socialite, always seemed to maintain a certain emotional distance. He never heard her mention any other children, and he naturally believed that he was an only child. Alexander's life revolved around meetings, numbers, business deals, and empty penthouses overlooking the Manhattan skyline, a world of high success but lacking in deep personal connection. A few blocks away, in a small, cozy art studio in Greenwich Village, 29-year-old Clara Hayes meticulously completes an oil painting. Natural light floods the room, illuminating her flowing auburn hair and her delicate, intelligent face. Clara is a freelance artist, living a simple, independent life, far removed from Alexander's glamorous world. She grew up with only her mother, a strong woman who kept her past to herself. Her mother never married and never told her who her father was. Clara accepted that, focusing on her passion for art and building her own life. Although she sometimes feels like a piece of the puzzle of her origins is missing, she doesn't let it haunt her. She was content with her independence and creative freedom, completely unaware that in another corner of the city there was a half-brother. Fate had arranged for them to meet on a sunny Saturday afternoon at the opening of a contemporary art gallery in Chelsea. Alexander had been invited by a business associate, a social event he had little interest in but was obliged to attend. He passed the works with an unconcerned expression until his eyes fell on a corner of the room where a woman stood silently, studying a colorful abstract painting with deep concentration and understanding. It was Clara. There was something about her that caught Alexander's eye, her quiet, intelligent beauty, and the look in her eyes that seemed to see through the chaotic splashes of color on the painting. Going against his usual habit of not engaging in conversation with strangers, he approached. "Interesting work, isn't it?" he said, his voice deep and warm. Clara turned around, a little surprised. She looked at the strange but attractive and charismatic man standing next to her. "Yes," she smiled slightly. "It makes me feel strangely chaotic and peaceful." "An interesting contradiction," Alexander replied, impressed by her answer. "I'm Alexander." "Clara," she introduced herself. They began talking, at first about art, about the painting in front of them, but it quickly turned to other topics. They were surprised to discover unexpected similarities: a love of a little-known writer, a satirical view of New York's upper class, and a sense of loneliness in this crowded city in very different ways. The conversation flowed naturally, strangely engaging. Alexander felt his cold, professional facade melt away when he was with Clara. He found himself laughing more, talking more about things unrelated to work. Clara also felt a special connection to this man. He was smart, thoughtful, and there was something in his eyes that made her feel as if she had known him for a long time. When the exhibition ended, they both felt regretful. "Can I buy you a coffee next week, Clara?" Alexander offered, an action that surprised even himself at his initiative. Clara smiled. "I'd be happy to, Alexander." They exchanged phone numbers, both feeling a strange, special thrill that signaled that something important was about to begin, unaware that the invisible thread connecting them was much deeper and more complex than they had imagined. Coffee cups quickly turned into romantic dinners, weekend walks in the park, endless nights of conversation about all sorts of topics under the warm yellow lights of the city. Alexander and Clara rushed into each other like two puzzle pieces finding their other half after years of being lost. Alexander, a man who had only known work and dry numbers, suddenly found his world more vibrant and alive than ever with Clara. He was fascinated by her warmth, honesty, strong independence, and soaring artistic soul. She was unlike any other woman he had ever met in the upper class, who were usually only interested in status, money, or superficial social relationships. Clara was straightforward, intelligent, opinionated, and not at all overwhelmed by his wealth or power. She saw him as a normal person, listening to his pressures and concerns with sincere understanding. With her, he felt like he could be himself, without having to put on the cold armor of a CEO. Clara also found in Alexander what she had always longed for. He was not only intelligent and successful, but also had an inner depth and sensitivity hidden behind his somewhat aloof appearance. He respected her passion for art, listened to her ideas with genuine interest, and sometimes made sharp comments that surprised her. He cared for her gently, somewhat awkwardly, like a man with little experience in love, but it was that awkwardness that made her feel warm and genuine. There was a tacit understanding between them, a strange harmony of souls that made them feel as if they could read each other's thoughts without words. The feeling of fate became more and more intense. They discovered more and more strange coincidences. They both loved a piece of classical music that few people listened to. They both had a habit of frowning when they were concentrating. They even had a small, faint scar on their left wrist from a small accident in their childhood. These coincidences made them believe even more that their meeting was not accidental, that they were truly made for each other. Once, a friend of Alexander's who happened to see them together commented, "You two really look a lot alike, like brothers." They both laughed, thinking it was an unintentional joke, without the slightest doubt. Love was so passionate, it overshadowed all reason and all potential warning signs. Their love grew quickly and intensely. They shared their deepest secrets, their fears, their burning dreams. The hugs became more passionate, the kisses deeper, full of passion and desire. They clung to each other, enjoying every moment of happiness, believing that they had found the true love of their lives, a perfect and destined connection. Little did they know that this connection was rooted in a cruel truth, and the love they were passionate about was the most terrible taboo. Alexander and Clara's sweet happiness lasted for a few months, long enough for their love to take root, long enough for them to start thinking about a future together. But fate, always ironic, began to reveal the first pieces of the cruel truth. Alexander's mother suddenly fell seriously ill. During the days of caring for her in the hospital and then at home, Alexander had more time to review old family memorabilia, things he had been too busy to pay attention to before. One afternoon, while sorting through an old filing cabinet in his father's office, he accidentally found a small, locked wooden box hidden deep inside. Curious, he tried to unlock it. Inside the box were things he had never seen before: yellowed handwritten letters, a few old photographs, and a small leather-bound diary. The letters were from his mother to some unknown man more than 30 years ago, telling of a passionate but ill-fated love, of a secret daughter she had been forced to give up, to be adopted by another family so she could marry his father, a rich and powerful man who did not accept her past. The accompanying photo was of a plump baby girl with ash-grey eyes and reddish-brown hair, exactly like Clara. The diary contained his mother's anguished and tormented words about that decision, about missing the daughter she could not be with. The girl's name, mentioned over and over in the diary, was Clara. Her date of birth was also surprisingly consistent. Alexander froze, feeling as if the blood in his veins had frozen. Clara? Sister? Impossible. This must be a terrible mistake. He read the words over and over again, stared at the photo, trying to find a reason to deny, to reject the horrible truth that was gradually appearing before his eyes. But every detail was too similar, too obvious. The strange familiarity he felt in Clara, the special understanding of her soul, the vague similarities, all of it suddenly had an extremely painful explanation. He rushed out of the house like a madman, his mind reeling in panic and disgust. He needed confirmation. He went to the old family lawyer who had served the Volkovs since his grandfather's time. At first, the lawyer refused to reveal anything, but at Alexander's urgent and almost desperate request, he finally admitted the truth he had been asked to keep secret for so many years. Yes, his mother had a daughter before her marriage, and that child was Clara Hayes, who had been adopted by another family and had no idea of her true origins until her adoptive mother died a few years ago and left a letter revealing the clues. The truth was like a cruel hammer blow to Alexander's head. His world collapsed completely. The passionate, intense love he had for Clara, the kisses, the hugs, the plans for the future. All of it now became a disgusting sin, an intolerable taboo. A feeling of nausea and horror invaded him. He did not know how to face Clara. How could he tell her the terrible truth? How could they look each other in the face after what had happened? He wandered the streets of New York all night, his soul broken, trying to find a way out of this cruel nightmare, but in vain. Meanwhile, Clara is also going through uncertain days. After her adoptive mother passed away, the letter she left behind revealed that she was adopted and gave some vague clues about her biological mother. Recently, encouraged by Alexander, she decided to try to find her roots. She hired a private detective, providing the little information she had, and the investigation results came on the day Alexander discovered the truth from the old box. The detective's report clearly stated her biological mother's name and also the name Volkov, the family that adopted her half-brother. Clara read the report, her hands and feet trembling, feeling like someone had just poured a bucket of ice water on her face. Alexander Volkov, the man she loved so much, the man she believed was her destiny, was actually her biological brother. The truth was so shocking, so horrifying, that she couldn't breathe. Everything became blurry, disgusting. Their beautiful love suddenly turned into an indelible stain. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Alexander. His voice was hoarse and trembling on the other end of the line. "Clara, we need to meet. There's something I need to tell you." They arranged to meet in a deserted corner of the park, where they had their first dates. When they saw each other, they were both stunned by the other's bewildered, pained expression. Without words, they knew that the other already knew the truth. There were no more warm hugs, no more affectionate eyes. There was only brokenness, pain, and utter confusion. They looked at each other as if looking into a mirror reflecting a distorted image of themselves, of a cruelly wrong relationship. "Is it true, Alex?" Clara whispered, her voice faltering. Alexander nodded, not daring to look her in the eye. "I'm sorry, Clara. I didn't know. It's disgusting." He couldn't finish the sentence. The two fell into silence, only sobbing and heartbreaking pain remained. Their love, which seemed destined, was now a tragedy written by the secrets of the past. Their world had been turned upside down, and there was no way back. The terrible shock of their blood relationship has created an unbridgeable chasm between Alexander and Clara. The intense physical and emotional intimacy they once shared has become a disgusting memory, a painful obsession. Soon after their fateful meeting in the park, they know that the only thing they can do is cut off all contact. Being near each other, even just seeing each other, becomes unbearable. Alexander returns to work, burying his head in numbers and projects as a way to escape the harsh reality. But the intense focus he had before has disappeared. He has become quieter, more distant. His smile has completely faded. The luxurious penthouse has become colder and emptier than ever. The pain, self-loathing, and anger at the mother who caused this tragedy torment him relentlessly. He turns to alcohol as a temporary escape, but it only makes him more isolated and desperate. Clara also fell into a similar state of collapse. She closed her art studio, stopped painting, stopped communicating with her friends. The image of Alexander, the sweet memories now tinged with guilt, constantly tormented her mind. She felt dirty, wrong, and completely disoriented. The pain came not only from losing love, but also from discovering a distorted part of her own identity. She sought help from a psychologist to try to cope with the shock and the mixed emotions: love, disgust, anger, loss. After a period of being immersed in grief, Alexander decided to confront his mother. The conversation between mother and son was full of tension and tears. She admitted her past mistakes, her selfishness and cowardice in abandoning Clara for a life of luxury. She expressed her regret belatedly, but the emotional wound she caused both children was too great, difficult to heal. The confrontation did not bring complete forgiveness, but it did help Alexander gain a better understanding of the tragedy's origins and release some of his pent-up anger. The healing process was slow and painful for both Alexander and Clara. They had to learn to accept the unchangeable truth, to learn to live with the pain and the haunting memories. The romance between them was dead, never to be revived. The question was whether they could find another form of connection as brothers, people of the same blood but with different fates and a tragic past. The answer was not easy. After more than a year of no contact, when the wound had somewhat healed but the scars were still deep, Alexander mustered up the courage to send Clara a brief email asking how she was doing and expressing his wish to meet again, simply to talk as brother and sister. Clara was very hesitant. Would she be ready to face Alexander again? Could they look at each other without being haunted by the past? In the end, she decided to agree. They met at a quiet coffee shop, not where they had dated. The meeting was awkward and distant. There was no longer a strange harmony of souls, only confusion and lingering sadness. They talked about work, about future plans in a polite manner. No one mentioned the past, but it still existed like a ghost between them. The brotherly relationship they tried to build would never be like other normal relationships. It would always carry the mark of tragedy, of a wrong love that had existed. Maybe they would occasionally contact each other, ask about each other from afar, like two strangers carrying a painful secret. Or maybe, after that meeting, they realized that the best way for both of them to truly move on was to completely have nothing to do with each other's lives anymore. The story does not end happily in the usual romantic sense. Alexander and Clara continue their separate lives, forever bearing the scars of a fateful but cruel love. They are victims of buried family secrets, a painful testament to the fact that not every special connection is a good destiny. Sharing the same blood, but fate has torn them apart in the most cruel way, leaving behind pain and irreparable loss. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.